Hello, everyone, and welcome to the inauguration of DAMA's Data Leaders Unfiltered Conversations. For many of our listeners, the isCDO organization is now merged with DAMA International and has become DAMA International Data Leaders and Affinity Group. So if you would like, please visit DAMA International website and go to the chapters and community section. And from there, you'll see the drop down and you'll be able to select Data Leaders Affinity Group. You'll be able to join us and grow with us. Now, before I introduce our speakers, let me quickly introduce our panel. With us, we've got Della Shea from Interact up in Canada. Della, it's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
We also have Peter Aiken from DAMA International, currently the president of DAMA International. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you. Still stuck on the end of a landline connection to the internet, so I can't join you by video, but you guys look great.
Yeah, you know what? We know what you look like, so you're excused. And of course, myself, Robert Lutton from Sandhill Consultants. Now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Joe Perez. Dr. Perez, Joe, to his friends and colleagues, is a powerhouse in the IT and the educational world with over 40 years of experience and a wealth of credentials to his name. And in fact, it's those credentials that we're going to draw upon during this conversation. From business intelligence specialist at North Carolina State University to senior systems specialist and team leader at North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, and also chief technology officer at Cognitive Mind, Dr. Perez is at the foremost of innovation and process improvement. With over 20,000 LinkedIn followers, and Joe, that's impressive, and a worldwide reputation as a keynote speaker, of course, we're delighted to have you here. Joe has talked at data management conferences and is a data management analytics expert and has award-winning books and is an award-winning author as well. So Dr. Perez is highly sought after in his resource field, and he speaks at many conferences each year, reaching audiences in over 20 countries across the globe, and has been highly ranked by prestigious thought leaders and communities around the globe. Dr. Perez recently introduced into the United Nations Global Network of Data Officers and Statisticians and was selected to be a distinguished fellow in the Public Sector Network's Future Growth Institute. Dr. Perez is now working where he shares his musical talents and gives back to community through his involvement through his Spanish churches and military ministries. And so with that, Dr. Perez, we'd like to welcome you here to our conversation, our unfiltered conversation, as we like to call it. Welcome, Dr. Perez.
Thank you so much, Robert. What a kind and gracious introduction, sir. It's my honor and pleasure to be here with you today.
And if you don't mind, if I can call you Joe.
Yes,
Joe,
of course.
Many thanks. I know that we've had obviously some pre-calls to set up on this first inauguration of our Unfiltered Conversations. And from our understanding, you've led teams through triumphs and disruption and change. And today, we wanted to explore leadership much less as a title and more as a lived experience as you have had. The good, the painful, and the lessons that stick. And now, before we begin, I wonder, Joe, if you can give our listeners just a little taste of what we're going to be talking today and kind of frame the discussion around how driving value and managing risks in these new technologies, which have just come on the scene in the last couple of years, such as AI in today's world.
Sure. Well, again, thank you, excuse me, for having me on the program today. I'm hoping to leverage the experience that I've had over the years. You give a you give a trained monkey a hammer, and sooner or later that monkey's going to figure out what to do with that hammer. I've been at this for 30, 40 something years, and I'd like to think maybe I'm a little bit smarter than a monkey, and I finally figured out how to use that hammer. But the experience that I've had, I want to talk about some of the lessons I've learned, the pitfalls, advice that I might be able to provide. Ups and downs, the value I want to create and hopefully be a benefit to the audience today. Essentially, they say everything rises and falls on leadership. But then again, a leader that doesn't have anybody to lead is not much of a leader, or who doesn't really do anything with the care that's been entrusted to him or her. then they're not going to do any good in leadership either. So I'm hoping that this will be valuable to the folks out there listening. And again, thank you so much for the honor and privilege of being here with you today.
Joe, no one else we would rather have on our first inauguration call. And just for our audience out there, this is being recorded, so you will be able to see it posted on the website later on down the line. So, Joe, we had some chats about, lessons learned. And one of the first questions we in the team kind of wanted to leverage was, what advice, if you could speak to yourself when you were 25 or 30, what advice would you give yourself early on in the career?
Sure. Well, Robert, if I could offer advice to myself at that age, I would emphasize the power of intentional growth, okay, and the courage to step out of your comfort zone. All right, look, early in your career, it's real easy to focus on stuff like technical mastery or deliverables, things that you have to give right away. But I think the real differentiator is how you invest in your own development and build that reputation for being adaptable and resilient. I would urge my younger self to actively seek out assignments that are more challenging. Seems counterintuitive, but no, you want to embrace feedback, even when it stings, to avoid the easy way out, as we're so prone to do. And maybe look at every single setback as a data point, not as a failure, a data point for learning, not so much a verdict on what your potential might be. And maybe the compounding effect of all these experiences, well, is profound. They build the confidence and agility that are essential for future leadership. Now, equally important is to build a strong peer network. I guess I tell myself, all right, Joe, go find you some peers who will challenge your thinking, those who will offer diverse perspectives, those who would push you to be better and are not afraid to give you honest feedback. You simply cannot put a price tag on all these different kinds of relationships, both for support and for accountability. Now, my experience, the greatest insights often come from peer mentoring circles and informal networks where real world challenges get dissected and solutions are created together. And at the same time, do not underestimate the value of reverse mentorship. Okay, that is, learning from those who are younger than you, those who might be less experienced in the traditional sense, I mean, but those who are going to bring you fresh perspectives or even expertise in emerging technologies. And finally, I guess I'd remind my younger self to be proactive in seeking this mentorship and sponsorship. Okay, find leaders who are going to inspire you. Watch closely how they navigate complexity, right? The ones who don't hesitate to ask for guidance. All right, and remember that mentorship is a two-way street, right? You bring value to your mentors by sharing your own insights and being open about your hopes and dreams. Even when you're 25 or 30, right? The racial relationships that you're going to build in your 20s and 30s, oh man, that's going to become the foundation of your leadership journey, Joe. Shaping what your career trajectory is going to be like, but also how you're going to influence talent in the years to come. That's what I'd tell myself.
So, Joe, it's really
Yes,
interesting.
Ma'am.
It's really interesting to hear you talk about like that full spectrum of advice that you would give yourself. And it wouldn't be amazing if we could wave a magic wand and go back and
Yes,
coach ourselves.
Right.
So now that you're a seasoned leader and looking back, was there anything specific that you were blind to
Sure.
that you wish you had known when you're 20?
I like that seasoned leader. Whether it's pepper, paprika, there's all kinds of stuff that's been sprinkled on me over the years. But yeah, but no, absolutely, Della. It's something I think a lot of us are blind to, and I don't mean the paprika either. in in the early stages of our careers. I mean, and that is how important emotional intelligence is, right? That and the human side of leadership. What's funny, when I was 25 or 30, oh, good heavens, that terminology had not even been invented.
Yeah.
The concept existed, just nobody called it that. And at that time, I was so focused on technical expertise, procedure, results, that I had underestimated just how much relationships, empathy, and truly listening to others would drive long-term success. Not just to others, but for the teams, for the organizations that you lead. Okay, I was literally blind to the fact that data and logic can only take you so far. Look, people are the real accelerators of progress, okay? And at the time I was an educator, right? But even back then, data and logic were part of my thing. Well, anyway, looking back, I can see that I often equated being right with being effective, right? I thought that if I had the best analysis, the clearest lesson plans, or the sharpest insights into my classroom experience, all that stuff was going to automatically earn me some buy-in and drive outcomes. But what I didn't fully grasp was that trust, connection, shared purpose, those things are just as critical as having the right answers. And I'll tell you something,
So
people,
true.
yes, people do not want to follow ideas as much as they want to follow people who will let them feel valued and supported and listened to, right? Listening to peers who often have solutions that you yourself might not see on your own. What I was blind to at 30 has since become one of my greatest leadership lessons. Right? You can have the most brilliant strategy in the world, Della, but if you don't invest in understanding your people and truly listening to their needs and aligning them to the mission, vision, and goals of your organization, okay, then even the best strategy is going to fail. So yes, leadership
So
involves
true.
driving initiative, right? But more than that, it involves creating an environment, okay, where others are empowered to thrive. Hey, that's a lesson that I wish I would have learned earlier, and it's one that I carry with me every day now.
Amazing.
Joe, thanks for that. I think really cogent explanation. You mentioned listening in there.
Yes, sir.
Who should we point our young leaders at so that they would be paying attention to the right types of information? Where should they be looking for these sources that you said?
Yes, sir. Well, I'd say everyone, Peter. No, I'm teasing. Maybe not. I don't know. Well, no, especially not everyone, but especially I'd say listen to the people who challenge your perspective. All right, look, first, you got to listen to your team, right? The people doing the work, okay, they're the closest to both the problem and the solutions. They're the ones that are going to tell you what's working, what's broken, what's fixable, and well, where all the opportunities are, challenges, whatever you want to call them. I mean, if you're really willing, here we go again. I couldn't say it earlier. Really willing. There we go. Really willing. There we go.
You got it?
I got it. I think I got it now. All right. Let's try that. Really willing to listen. All right. So to your team, to your peers, listen to your peers, right? They're in the trenches. They see things from different angles that you might miss. Okay. Their insight's going to help you avoid blind spots we talked about earlier. Sharpen your decision making. Thirdly, most importantly, listen to people that you might not naturally agree with. Okay, that might seem a little counterintuitive, but hear me out before you throw rocks at me. Okay, look, you don't live in an echo chamber. All right, the best leaders don't just surround themselves with agreement. They actively should seek out diverse views, even if it's a little uncomfortable. You do not need to have all the answers. You just need to listen to the people who can help you find those answers.
I think it was Doris Kearns Goodwin who said the team of rivals, right?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. And the name on the back of your jersey is more important than the name on the front of your jersey, as I think was said in the what was it, the movie Miracle. That was the story of the American hockey team, Olympic hockey team, and the one guy that wanted to hot dog it during practice. The coach took him aside, says the name on the back of your shirt, Team USA or whatever, is more important than your own name, the name on the front of your shirt. So listen to your team.
And Joe, just before I asked just a follow-up question to that,
Mhm.
I do want to recognize our amazing listeners that are chiming in with, how right this is. I wish I had learned that before. So please do keep your comments coming into the section here. We do see them as they float across the screen. Now, Joe, one last
Yes, sir.
question on advice that that you've talked about, because again, you've got a lot of experience and you've heard advice from a lot of different people. What would you say is the most valuable advice or the kind of advice that you've received from your peers?
The most valuable advice I say I've received from my peers, I would say, is to ensure that I am true to myself. Okay. Um, that I move forward, that I learned how to adapt to whatever situation comes my way. Um, sometimes new ideas come, new situations come, new modus operandi, and that kind of thing. That you need to learn to adopt what's being thrown at you. Sometimes you need to tweak it so that it will fit within your mission, vision, and goals. Okay. In that sense, you might need to adapt. But either way, once you're at the end of the process, perhaps you'll be more adept. So sometimes you adopt, sometimes you adapt. Either way, you got to learn to be adept. And I kind of formulated it and articulated in that way, but that's what I think is one of the best things that I've learned.
Thank you.
Amazing. So, Joe, I mean, we've had lots of great advice from your experience, but what about when things go wrong? So, when leadership goes wrong, like,
Hmm.
what are your thoughts on that? What have you learned?
Sure. Um, well, Della, I I believe it makes an impact that's deeply personal. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's all kinds of surveys, polls, research, everything else that I could quote or whatever. Yeah, but at the end of the day, we simply can't forget the personal side of things. I mean, look, um, it hits people where they work, where they spend their time, and often where they derive a sense of purpose. All right, poor leadership creates an environment where trust gets eroded, morale crumbles, people stop feeling connected to the organization. Yeah, or even to each other for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that. Yeah, but when leaders are, say, toxic, neglectful, aloof, or just plain ineffective, it's not just the work that suffers. It's the people too. They suffer too. They disengage. They lose motivation, and eventually, you know what? They're going to start looking for the door. Okay,
Yeah.
high performers in particular, they're not going to stick around in a culture that doesn't value or inspire them. And you know what's worse? This isn't something that happens overnight. Okay, it is a slow, steady decline that
Mm-hmm.
shows up in tiny, everyday moments, so to speak. Things like lack of recognition for hard work. Okay, poor communication that leaves people feeling isolated, or out of the loop. Leaders who are more focused on their own ego,
Yeah.
swelling their head than empowering their team. Over time, all this
That
has a
makes sense.
cumulative effect. I could call it I don't know, a culture of cynicism, apathy, whatever. People stop caring, not because they don't want to, but
Mm-hmm.
because they don't believe that their care is going to make a difference. And let me tell you something, that's a tough thing to recover from. And
Yeah.
the truth is, this doesn't affect just the people involved, it also affects the results. Look,
Right.
when morale is low, collaboration breaks down, creativity dries up, productivity takes a hit, and things can just start unraveling. Okay, bad leadership creates a ripple effect that affects every layer of the organization, the way teams interact, to how customers are treated. It's a reminder that that leadership goes beyond driving outcomes, right? It's how
That's
you
true.
drive them. Okay. And when you get it
But
wrong,
outcomes.
it's going to show up. Yeah, it's going to show up in the culture, the relationship,
Yeah.
the attitudes, and the everyday energy of your organization.
So, Joe, how does that show up day to day? Because I don't know. The analogy that I'm getting from you is a frog sitting in a pot of water and you're gradually increasing the temperature, right?
Yeah.
What are things that people can use to identify, take away from here that they would see this kind of thing, and maybe they ought to get back on LinkedIn and look for something better, right?
Right. Yeah. Excellent analogy about the frog too, Peter. Okay. It's going to show up in the little things, Peter, because guess what? The little things are the big things if you think about it. Okay. You see it when people stop speaking up in meetings. Okay, because
Yeah.
they don't think anybody's listening to them, or when teams hesitate to take risks because they're afraid that they're going to get blamed for something they didn't do. All right. It's in the disengaged body language. Okay, the missed opportunities for collaborations, the subtle shift from thriving to just surviving. Being satisfied with the status quo. That's a pet peeve of mine. Day by day, this culture of silence, fear, distrust, and disengagement. But the good news is, I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm doing doom and gloom. Okay, I mean, this can be turned around with the right effort. You see it in how communication breaks down. Oh man, when trust erodes, transparency is going to go away. Teams tend to hoard information all to themselves. Again, I'm painting with a broad brush here, I know, but you know, um, people can stop asking for help because maybe they don't feel safe doing so. Progress can stall. Energy starts shifting from, say, we're all in this thing together to every man for himself, or every lady for themselves. Don't want to be sexist. Uh, but great leadership, by contrast, can rebuild this, rebuild trust. Okay, they do it by enabling open dialogue, showing that good ideas and good people are valued. But again, on that negative side, the hardest part about this whole thing, Peter, uh, it's contagious. Because when morale drops, it tends to spread. But then again, so does optimism, right? Leadership steps in and tries to make things right, whether it's from the top down or the bottom up. We have the ability to shape the culture, whether it's intentional or not. That's why good leadership is so important. Not necessarily because you can avoid setbacks altogether. I mean, you think that no matter how good the leadership is, it's just a given. Um, but no, it's just to ensure that there's always going to be a good path forward.
Well, I'm hearing in what you're saying too, that's something that maybe we ought to talk about offline, but that the culture of an organization can actually lead to bad data management practices. And that's sort of an interesting piece. We won't dive down that piece here because we've got a number of other points we want to get to as well. Robert, I think you had next one.
Yeah, no, and Peter, a good idea. We definitely want to save that for another conversation. But Joe,
Sure.
you talked about leadership, and I'm wondering if you can maybe talk to the fact that, from your point of view, do you see bad leadership as something that is intentional, or is accidental?
That's a good one. Um, I'm glad you asked me that, Robert. Um, it's Let me think. It's my conviction that bad leadership, I'd say it's almost always accidental. Now, it doesn't make it any less damaging. Think about it. Most leaders aren't going to wake up saying, "Oh, well, today I'm going to be a bad leader. Today I'm going to fail my team. Gee, I think I'll derail my organization this week." I really don't think anybody gets up saying that anyway. If they do, there's something screwy going on with their head, okay? They need Drano for the Braino or something. I don't know. But to be more realistic, I think bad leadership comes from a lack of self-awareness for the most part. Either that or poor communication. I don't know, maybe even a little bit of self-centeredness. The ego has quite a bit to do with this. Or simply being unprepared for the complexities of leading people. Hey, a lot of them mean well, but they don't have the chops to do it. With all that said, Robert, intent does not erase impact, right? Even well-meaning leaders can create toxic cultures or disengaged teams, if they don't actively invest in developing their skills. Also, I say listening to others, adapting to the needs of their people. One might argue leadership is just doing your best. No, it's more than that. I'm convinced it is much more than that. Okay. It's being intentional, learning constantly, owning the influence that you have over others. So while bad leadership might not necessarily be deliberate, it is preventable. All right, look, great leaders are the ones who recognize their 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 talents, their shortcomings, their the talents, whatever, and they're willing to put in the work to grow. It takes work. It takes time. It takes admitting that you need some help. Yeah, you're not the best that maybe you thought you were. Taking personal ownership and responsibility. Okay, yeah, right. Okay, accidents happen when you treat it as anything less than what I just said.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Peter, I think you were up next.
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. Trying to segue directly into that next question. Yeah, all right.
Talking on mute. That's the story of my life.
Question, though. Are leaders born or made? And I think you started to address that with that last set of comments in there.
Yeah. Well, with me being a technical person, Peter, you got to know my favorite answer to that kind of question is it depends. But I'm not going to give you a cop out, Peter. But in a way, it kind of does depend on God. Let me explain what I mean by that. Again, I don't want anybody throwing rocks at me, virtual rocks, whatever. The question about whether leaders are born or made, I see it as a nuanced thing. Research shows that certain personality traits like, I don't know, being an extrovert rather than an introvert, that helps. Having a sense of ownership, that helps. Being conscientious, being open, all these different characteristics, they do have a genetic component to them in a manner of speaking. But, these traits alone do not necessarily guarantee effective leadership. This guy named Adolf during World War II had a lot of these. Okay, we won't get into that. But, look, the most successful leaders are the ones that combine their perhaps whatever innate strengths that they have with a relentless commitment to learning self-awareness and their own personal skill development. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard the question, is it nature or is it nurture? Well, you know what? I'm convinced that leadership is best understood as a dynamic interplay between the two. I don't mean that as a cop-out. It's true. Yeah, both nature and nurture. Let me take this a little further. Look, leaders are designed, made, whatever the word you want to use, through a combination of intentional experiences, maybe some structured development, and listening to continual feedback. Okay, top business schools and organizations invest heavily in leadership development programs that emphasize experiential learnings. I think they call it 360-degree feedback or something like that. Real world problem solving that they do. These kinds of programs help individuals build the critical skills they need. Things like emotional intelligence. We come back to that again. Strategic thinking, communication, all those buzzwords that are not really buzzwords, because I see them as essential for leading diverse teams and driving organizational change. The things that leadership's supposed to do anyway. Okay, I don't know, mentorship, coaching, exposure to challenging assignments. These are the kinds of things that further the growth that I'm talking about, Peter. To sum it up, it's a journey, right? And the journey to effective leadership is rarely linear. It involves moving through stages. You're a follower, a collaborator, you're an instructor, manager, influencer, and ultimately leader. Something like that. Each of those steps, it may or may not be in the same order. You may not call them the same thing, whatever, but each step requires new skills and perspectives as you continue in your personal growth. And the most impactful leaders are the ones that are going to stay adaptable, who seek out that feedback we've been talking about, who want to revisit the earlier stages in their development as new challenges arrive. Again, continuous improvement. I keep saying that. In my own experience, the willingness to learn from both success and failure, and to surround yourself with diverse mentors and peers and subordinates, for that matter, in every direction. Those are the things that truly design a leader who's capable of shaping their culture, their talent for the better. And at the same time, one who was born with these talents and skills and personality already, who's willing to channel those talents and develop them, even the undesirable ones, develop those through education, channel them through training, all the things I'm talking about, so that they can become a better leader, even if they don't think they were born that way.
So, Joe, I think that's really important to distinguish that you have traits that certainly can set certain people up with kind of a head start, but it's probably very rare that people are going to have like the full spectrum of being able to be an effective leader from day one. So thinking about that, like in thinking about my own kind of journey, it's about being able to not just lead from that technical expertise, but things that are not as an inherent, such as leading through uncertainty, like taking ambiguity and turning it into something that is comprehensible for the folks that you are leading. So from that perspective, how do you think your leadership has evolved in your own journey?
Well, I used to be a salamander. No, sorry. Not that kind of evolution. I don't believe in that. But anyway, that's another story. I think I learned to embrace the balance of embracing, let's see, how am I going to say this? The balance of strength and confidence on the one side, and then humility and gratitude on the other. Now, for me, as a Christian, I've come to believe that being placed in a leadership position is both a responsibility and I see it as a calling. It isn't something that I take lightly, but also not something to bear on my own. For me, trusting in God has been central to my growth as a leader, knowing that I definitely need His wisdom, to make the right decisions and to lead in a way that ultimately glorifies Him. Early on, Della, I thought that leadership was, more about doing everything myself, proving my worth by taking on every single challenge personally, every single one, take one for the team, But over time, I realized that leadership doesn't mean that you're always carrying everybody's weight and load and everything. No, it means empowering others to carry it with you. Okay, delegation, shows efficiency, but I see it as more than that. It's giving others the opportunity to grow themselves, to succeed, to get better at what they do because they helped you with your own load. All right. I began to see that my own load, my own role wasn't to control every outcome, but mainly to create an environment where others could thrive too. And I've come to see that leadership requires the confidence to stand alone when you have to, the courage to make tough decisions when you have to, and the compassion to listen to the needs of the other. Douglas MacArthur, I think, talked about that. I like that combination, right? Confidence, courage, and compassion. I don't remember the exact quote, but something like that. Anyway, at the same time, I also learned that advancing my own career isn't what it's all about. Yeah, my career is going to get advanced, but I got to keep that in perspective and not make it the most important thing. Understanding whatever I do, however it develops, I got to make a positive impact. I got to bring value to the organization. I've got to lift others up and help everybody grow together, right? But at the same time, I need to keep my focus on glorifying God in the way that I lead. And that perspective, Della, I think that's what gave me the sense of confidence tempered by humility and gratitude all at the same time.
Joe, just as I see, thanks, Della. Joe, just as I see some of the comments there, which are quite funny as they flow through. I want to assure everyone that Dr. Perez is not an AI and does have all his fingers and thumbs and
Yeah.
everything else. So he doesn't have a third hand. So don't worry about that. But one of the things that we want to leverage your experience. That's the whole point about it. We want to learn from people that have been through the trenches and things like that. So, regarding this topic, was there a turning point that you recognized that you could point to in your evolution that you said, in hindsight, it was at this point that I realized that, hey, leaders are really, made or, and mature into their own rights. Is there a point that you'd recognize in your evolution that might help other people?
Sure. Okay, Peter, there was indeed a pivotal moment that shifted my perspective on leadership and delegation. Delegation specifically, I kind of alluded to it earlier. It happened after not very long after I was promoted to computer training manager where I worked at a university where I worked at the time. I inherited somewhat of a mess. I don't want to sound critical or ugly or anything, but it was under the previous manager, and I was under enormous pressure to turn things around really quickly. On top of that, I was working for a boss who, well, at the time, I felt, later I learned he wasn't all that bad. He made everything harder at the time by insisting that certain things be done in a rigid, specific way. I mean, I was running myself into the ground, working 60, 70 hours a week or more, trying to do it all myself. I thought that if I don't know, maybe if I work harder, maybe if I work longer hours, maybe if I just do more, maybe I could fix everything. It was driving me crazy. It wasn't working. I was exhausted, worn out. Anyway, one of the contract instructors that I brought in to teach some of the classes that I was responsible for, and she was a longtime friend. She saw me struggling, sat me down, and gave me some really good advice. I mean, this is advice. Yeah, to be honest with you, it stopped me in my tracks. She said, don't hold on to what you need to let go of, and don't let go of what only you can do and hold on to. And that struck a deep chord in me. Okay. I mean, it sounds simple, almost too simple, but I wasn't getting it up to that point. I couldn't do everything on my own. And by trying to, I wasn't only burning myself out, I was also holding my team back. I mean, man, that was like a light bulb moment, Robert. I started delegating more intelligently, breaking processes into manageable chunks that other folks on the team could take on in parallel rather than me doing everything sequentially. Right. I let go of the need to control every single detail, and I focused on the things that truly required my leadership, my expertise, or whatever. And I'm not going to lie to you. It was not an instant fix. It took time. But I started to see real measurable progress after that. And most importantly, well, I stopped collapsing under the weight of it all. That and a whole lot of prayer. Yeah. That turned the situation around by the grace of God. That moment, that meeting, that conversation, that taught me something really profound. And that is, leadership is about trusting your team, letting go of unnecessary control, and maybe focusing on the areas where you yourself can make the greatest impact, and let others make the impact they can make. That shift in my mindset, that's what turned everything around for my career, for my team, and, well, for me personally as well.
Uh, Profound statements. Don't micromanage, right? And trust your team to
Yes,
do what they're going to do. Uh,
absolutely.
so as we move on to that, it kind of brings up another kind of discussion point, which is, you know, handling setbacks and hard decisions.
Yeah,
So, Murphy's Law, if it can go wrong, it will go wrong.
yes.
So when things do go wrong, from your point of view, how should a leader respond? Do they ignore? Do they pivot? What's your thoughts on that?
Okay. Um, let's see. Well, when things go wrong, And believe me, they always will, Robert. All right.
Don't
But
they
true
just?
leaders.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. No. Um, True leaders don't ignore the problem. They don't panic. They pursue it head on. They might panic momentarily, but after the initial panic is gone, they're going to pursue it. They're going to take the bull by the horns and go head on and pursue it with the doggedness and a willingness to pivot, as you put it, when needed. I see crisis as well. It's the ultimate test of a leader's character, and how you respond in these moments will set the tone for your entire team. Control the things you can control. Respond how you can to the things that you can't control. Um, First step, Robert, acknowledge the problem openly. Ignoring the problem, it's going to erode trust because it's not going to go away. People see it and it's going to create a culture of avoidance. Everybody else wants to avoid it. Take ownership. Be transparent with your team about what went wrong, what you know, what you don't know, and what steps are being taken. All right. And that kind of honesty and transparency keeps your team engaged and it builds trust, credibility. All right. From there, you start pursuing the root cause relentlessly. What happened? How did it go wrong? But at the same time, you stay flexible. Sometimes the solution does require a pivot, a different approach, or even rethinking your goal entirely, but never, never, never ignore it. Leaders who focus solving the problem and not so much sticking to the plan, they're the ones who tend to succeed more often than not. Setbacks aren't the enemy, Robert. You know what is? Denial. That's the enemy. That's why I say don't ignore. When you confront that problem directly, you're going to turn that problem into an opportunity for growth, for learning, for innovation. Teams and organizations that thrive after a crisis, they're the ones where leaders are visible, they're engaged, they show themselves vulnerable, and they keep focused on progress more so than perfection. Leadership doesn't avoid problems, period. Instead, it shows your team what's possible when you face those problems together. So pivot or pursue. Sometimes pivot and pursue, but I say never, ever ignore, Robert.
No, very good. Good advice.
That's really good advice. You've mentioned something that kind of resonated with me in terms of the things that you control. But what about the things that you don't necessarily control? So I think when you know the things and you can do the root cause analysis and put the plans in place to either pivot or to pursue. But what about things such as budget constraints or things outside of your realm of influence? How does it play out?
Yeah. It's all about money, 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 money. Yeah. How do you do it? Well, quite simple. Don't spend what you don't have. Okay. That's too easy. No, I'm kidding. Actually, I'm not kidding. I mean, you really can't spend more than what you had. Yeah, well, unless you're the federal government of the U.S. Yeah. No, Della. I think the way this plays out, budget pressure. Budget pressure is not an excuse to avoid solving problems. Okay. Instead, I see it as maybe a call to lead a little smarter. When resources are tight, the key isn't so much to panic or to go around slashing everything in sight. I mean, some people might do that. Prioritize. I say prioritize ruthlessly. Focus on what's going to drive the most value. Leaders need to step back and ask themselves, all right, look, what's mission critical? What's just noise? What are the actions that are going to give me the greatest return? Whether it be financial, operational, cultural, technical, whatever. Budget constraints force you to look at things with more clarity. And let me tell you, clarity, that's the thing that saves and separates. Let's see. Clarity is the thing that separates impulsive leaders from leaders who can move forward. Okay. Here's the thing: a budget reflects your priorities, right? And your ability to make decisions under pressure. You have limits. If something's really important to you, your people, your culture, your customers, your ability to deliver results, and how you're going to do it, that sort of thing. you're going to find some way to protect it. A tight budget doesn't mean that you stop solving problems. They just mean that, you solve them with creativity, more focus, and an unwavering commitment to what can matter the most to you. I think that is where true leadership shows up, Della.
So given that, Joe, and again, things do go wrong, as you said. It's kind of Murphy's Law out there. And
Yeah.
my own personal reference is the serenity prayer, right? But what should
Yes.
leaders avoid in those moments when they're facing that? What are their behaviors? How do you want to attack that?
What should they avoid? I would say avoid arsenic and sulfuric acid. But that's right. No, other than that, Peter, I got a couple of ideas here, other than the arsenic and the sulfuric acid. Leaders need to avoid reacting out of fear, maybe even out of ego too. I think those are the two biggest traps. Okay, look, fear is going to make you freeze up, right? It makes you kind of sometimes overcorrect and avoid making tough decisions altogether. I don't want to touch that thing, On the other hand, ego makes you think that you need to have all the answers. It leads you to dismiss input from others. I know what I'm doing. Keep from delegating, like it did with me, like, we talked about earlier, okay? Yeah, it pushes you to double down on a bad call just to save face. I'm not going to, I'm just going to keep going. Fear and ego pull you away from logic, collaboration, progress, and in the end, success. Let's see, another big one. Don't confuse activity with impact. All right, listen, in high pressure moments, it's so easy to fall into the trap of doing more, throwing resources, money, wherever there's noise, throw in other resources, or micromanaging over the feel like you need to be in control and manipulate things. That's a huge mistake. And let me tell you something, leaders need to focus on what the most important thing is, not just doing more things, right? Clarity, prioritization, those things, best tools in moments like that. And let's see, one more thing. Don't stop listening. We've said that before. Pressure can make leaders close off, thinking I got to fix it alone, like we've been talking about. That's when you need to lean on your team and on your peers the most. The answers aren't always going to come from your own head. There's only so much you can put in there. And your job isn't so much to have all the answers. No, it's to make the best decisions you can with the combined knowledge, insights, and talent of the people around you who can give you the input you need. The best leaders know that even in tough moments, they're not in it alone, Peter.
So we've heard so much from you today, Joe, and I know that we're coming close to the close of this session. So I kind of want to wrap some things up before we move on to some of the other sections from a 360 perspective. So if you look at everything that you've discussed, how would you describe your leadership from that 360 degree perspective? And what does that mean to you?
Oh, I really like that, Della. We alluded to it earlier, being a 360 degree leader, for those who don't already know, it means leading with influence, right? Not just authority, that's important, not just mandates, they're important, but making sure that you're creating impact in every direction, up, down, and across the organization, 360 degrees, recognizing that leadership isn't confined to some title, some position, grand poobah or whatever, it's the ability to inspire, guide, add value regardless of where you might sit in the specific hierarchy of the organization. Let me break that down a little. 360 degree leader leads down by empowering and developing their team, the ones who report to her or him, and making sure they've got all the tools, all the clarity, all the ability, and all the support so they can thrive and succeed. They also lead across by collaborating with peers, building trust and creating alignment to drive collective success. Now, here's the one that sometimes gets ignored. They lead up by managing relationships with senior leaders, the ones above them, right? Offering them solutions rather than just problems. And influencing their strategy with your thoughtful insights and a deep understanding of the organization's goals. So up, down, and across 360 degrees.
So important to not just
Yes,
be
ma'am.
focusing one way, but it's really that whole view. So
Absolutely.
talk forever. I think that there's perhaps a part two to this discussion. So
And Joe, just as a follow-on, just on this particular topic of the 360-degree leader,
Yes, sir.
how would you see, or how would you advise someone to build that capability?
Buy low, sell high. No, that's how you get rich in the stock market. Sorry.
And does it even work?
And sometimes that doesn't even work either. And this is probably less sure sometimes, Robert, I think we all need to understand our own strengths. What are my strengths? What are my blind spots? How do my actions impact others at every level? Okay. From there, it's about consistently practicing a few core behaviors. All right. I'd say first, empower others. You know, invest in building trust, developing the people around you, strengthening their skills. And that's whether they report to you or they're beside you as your peers, or even those that lead above you. Right? Again, that 360 thing: down, across, up. Empowering creates alignment and loyalty and camaraderie and shared success. Right? You've done something to help someone else. They're going to be a little bit more amenable to helping you sometime when you need it as well. Okay. I'd also say collaborate and listen, be intentional about listening to diverse perspectives, especially, again, I mentioned this earlier, peers, those who challenge your thinking rather than agreeing with every single thing you say. You need that diversity. Collaboration's not going to do anything but sharpen your decision making, and it builds influence and trust across the organization that you were willing to close your mouth for just a second and listen to what somebody else had to say because they said something that didn't entirely agree with you. If you're open enough and you're secure enough in your own position that you're going to listen to what they have to say to you, man, that's going to increase your level of credibility among others instead of somebody who keeps telling somebody else to shut up. That sounds unkind, but hey, look, we got to be proactive about adding value. All right. Here's where you, all of you's in here, anticipate needs, share your insights, particularly when you're working with senior leaders. I am of the conviction, Robert, that influence comes from consistently contributing to the bigger picture. Don't be intimidated to do so. And at its core, building this capability is about choosing to lead by example, no matter what role that you yourself have. It doesn't matter what your title is. To build this, focus on consistent, intentional actions that demonstrate that you can be trusted, that you are empathetic, that you've got integrity, and you're committed not so much to your own success, but to the success of others.
Amen to that, Joe. Joe, I know that we're coming up here on the top of the hour, and we'll just go to the kind of last question that we had talked about.
Okay.
And really for our audience there, what's the one thing that you wish more leaders understood in all your exposure and history? What do you think that what would your wish be for them to kind of take away? What would you wish they understood more of?
Okay. The one thing that I wish more leaders understood is this. Leadership rhymes with stewardship, right? Not status. Nothing to do with titles, nothing to do with authority or being the smartest person in the room. If you're the leader, could you be the smartest person in the room? You might be. Would you possibly have the highest status? You might, but not necessarily. That's not what leadership really is. Okay, it's about how well you serve the people, the mission, and the trust that's been placed in your care. You're responsible for that. And in my experience, I see leadership as a sacred responsibility. One that demands humility that demands accountability, integrity, and maybe an unwavering commitment to excellence. Look, too many leaders get caught up in metrics and outcomes. They're important, but alone, they're not good enough. You know, the true measure of leadership is the impact you have on others. Did you inspire somebody to believe in themselves? Did you create space for somebody to rise? Did you leave things better than how you found them? Right? Leadership is not about being seen so much as it's about seeing others. Okay? It's about lifting people up, not just pushing results forward. Now, for me, leadership has always been about something bigger than myself. All right. My goal, well, I said it before, is to bring glory to God. All right. Not just through the work that I do, but through the excellence that I try to put forward and the value that I try to bring every opportunity that I'm given. Yeah, I guarantee you, I'm not going to always succeed, but at least I strive for that, with every ounce of my strength, with every bit of my enthusiasm and passion. You can tell I got a little bit of that. Uh, Look, I mean, setting expectations, that's not enough. Meeting expectations, that's not enough either, because I don't see an expectation as a finish line. I see it as a starting point. Look, excellence requires going beyond what's asked. Refuse to be satisfied with the status quo, doing the hard things when nobody else is watching, and showing people what's possible when they choose to exceed rather than settle. And at the end of the day, folks, let me tell you something. Leaders need legacies, not just results. Results are good, but you got to have that legacy. And the legacy that I hope that every leader strives for is one where the people that they led were better, stronger, brighter, and more inspired because of their example. Leadership isn't so much about what you achieve as it is about what you give. And the most extraordinary leaders, okay, they're the ones that pretty much give everything that they have for a purpose that's far greater than themselves. And I'll tell you what, that is the standard, because that is what true leadership demands. And if you can meet that demand, somebody can look you in the face and say, you, sir, you, ma'am, are a leader.
Joe.
What a great closing line.
Thank you very, very much indeed. Joe, this has been a very powerful and honest conversation. And to our listeners, this is our first broadcast under the DAMA Data Executive Affinity Group. We hope that you get a chance to join our group and to hear more unfiltered conversations coming out. We love the comments. We will incorporate some of the comments in future unfiltered conversations, make sure that we get some of that feedback coming out. But I'd like to thank Dr. Perez for his gracious time today. Thank you, Joe.
The honor and pleasure have been mine, Peter, and Robert and Della and everyone else here. Thank you so much for the honor. Thank you for the privilege. I've enjoyed it thoroughly, and more than anything, I just want to bring value to you guys and to whomever else that I have the opportunity for someone to be so gracious as to invite me into their living room for a few minutes to talk about stuff. So again, thank you, sir. Robert, you're a great host. Y'all are just awesome.
Well, it is. And again, my thanks to Della and Peter and Michael Cervantes, who could not be with us today. But thank you for the International Society of Chief Data Officers community that has merged over into the data leaders, DAMA data leaders community. We've got exciting things planned for our community. And of course, I'd like to just thank Jennifer for hosting this and corralling all the teams into it. So with that, Della, Peter, any last minute conversations or comments from you guys?
Yeah, we're looking forward. Sorry, Della, you go first.
Okay, sorry. I was just going to say, no, I thoroughly enjoyed this. I'm very pleased to see so many people that have joined and looking forward to continuing these conversations.
And Joe, we're looking forward to seeing you keynote the conference in May, the data quality and IQ and EDW thing. So again, we'll hopefully build on top of what you've already given everybody today. Thanks for sharing.
And
Yes,
and
sir.
Joe,
Thank you.
Joe, Dell, and Peter, if you can just all hang on just a minute, we'll let everyone else go. I think Jennifer wants to have a quick regroup. So for everyone else, thank you very much indeed, and keep an eye out for more stuff coming from the Ideal group at DAMA Data Leaders team. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
So Jennifer, I'm not sure. Do you then can